Valley Forge was once a home to over 12,000 soldiers. It is one of the most historic places in the United States. But what people do not know is that a lot more happened here than the winter encampment of 1777 into 1778. First, let's take a look at a winter encampment. The date is December 19th, 1777. George Washington just lost 3 battles in the span of 3 months. Because of these losses, the British were able to take Philadelphia. George Washington moves his army of about 12,000 troops to Valley Forge. Valley Forge gave the Continental Army a geographic advantage. There are wide open fields, slopes, ridges, and the Schuylkill River. These features made Valley Forge a natural fort. Having just lost 3 battles and marching for more than 64 miles, the troops were in horrible condition and morale was really low. On top of being in horrible condition, Congress was not able to provide new supplies because they did not have any money. The soldiers only had the clothes that they were wearing. These clothes were ripped and dirty.
I made myself a pair of moccasins, which kept my feet from the frozen ground. The only alternative was to go barefoot, as hundreds of my companions had to, till they might be tracked by their blood upon the rough, frozen ground.
Even though the morale and supplies were low, the troops made hundreds of cabins and miles of trenches with earthen mounds. They even built a bridge over the Schuylkill River.
Most people today, when they think about entrenchments, they usually imagine foxholes that soldiers were built in the field. Or they might think about World War I and the huge trench system that was built on the Western Front. In those, the soldiers are actually in the trench and actually hiding in the trench. That was not the case back in the 1700s. In the 1700s, when you built entrenchments, yes, you dug a trench, but your trench was not your shelter. The shelter is the mound of earth that you're piling up behind the trench. So what you're basically seeing is an earthen fort called a redoubt, or redout. And this was a square earthen bunker designed to protect one end of this encampment.
Even though the morale was low, most of the troops did not give up. However, it is estimated that there were over 2,000 deserters. When deserters were caught, they were punished and sometimes killed. When George Washington chose to camp in Valley Forge, he did not realize that he was going to lose more men here than in any battle of the Revolution. Around 2,000 men died in Valley Forge, but these men did not die from musket balls or bayonets. 2/3 of them died from smallpox, pneumonia, dysentery, typhoid, and typhus. 1/3 died from the cold and starvation. The diseases reached epidemic proportions. When a soldier came down with the disease, they were removed from camp and isolated from others. However, the diseases spread fast because of the damp, crammed log cabins. Everything was looking bad for the Continental Army. However, on February 13th, 1778, there is a glimmer of hope. Frederick Wilhelm von Steuben arrives at Valley Forge. Many people know him as the Prussian Baron von Steuben. It turns out that he was not actually a baron in the Prussian military. Historians believe that Benjamin Franklin faked the credentials. Steuben trained the Continental Army and turned them into a coordinated fighting force. Not only did he train the soldiers, but he also brought order and discipline to the men, and he reorganized the camp to be more sanitary. By May 5th, 1778, the men are trained, and Washington receives news that the French military agreed to help fight against the British. The British also received the news about France joining, and they realized the French will go after the islands because of the sugar cane. The troops that were occupying Philadelphia made their way to New York, but they were not fast enough. George Washington and his now trained military attacked them at Monmouth. The Continental Army is victorious, causing the British to retreat. This monumental battle marks the end of the winter encampment at Valley Forge. For several decades after the troops left, Valley Forge was turned into farmland. In 1803, Alexander Kennedy bought 120 acres of land from one of the major landowners of the time. Alexander later realized that his land was rich in limestone, so he began to build quarries and furnaces to extract the lime. He used this lime as a fertilizer and sold it to the neighboring farms. In 1815, the Schuylkill River was chartered for the use of transporting coal. Alex's son, John, saw this as an opportunity to expand their limestone business. This expansion turned the village into Port Kennedy. There is very little left of Port Kennedy. You can find part of a railway that connected the quarries to the Reading Railroad, the train station, the church, and the Kennedy Suplee Mansion. In 1852, John Kennedy built his Victorian Italianate mansion. The mansion does not have an owner, so it has not been taken care of. The building is targeted by thieves because of the copper piping, and you cannot go into the building without air respirators. In 1871, miners at Archibald Irwin's quarry were blast mining. While doing this, they uncovered a cave that was about 30 feet deep. In this cave, the miners found fossils and contacted Edward Drinker Cope and Charles Wheatley, who were both renowned archaeologists from Philadelphia. Some of the fossils they uncovered are American mastodons, Armbruster's wolves, badgers, beavers, black bears, bobcats, box turtles, Cope's muskrats, Diluvian fishers, eastern cottontails, Gracile saber-tooths, gray foxes, Hayes tapirs, jaguars, jaguarundis, long-nosed peccaries, meadow-jumping mice, pikas, porcupines, Port Kennedy skunks, river otters, Schlosser's wolverines, short-faced skunks, squirrels, tortoises, turkeys, Wheatley's ground sloths, white-tailed deer, and coyotes. The archaeologists had to stop excavating because of flooding. The cave was covered up and the location was lost, but in the 1890s it was rediscovered. This time, Dr. Samuel Dixon and Dr. Henry Mercer examined the remains of the cave, but they were not able to excavate because of flooding. The precise location was again lost. A group of scientists may have recently found the location, but they do not know for sure because they are not able to dig due to asbestos deposits. In 1895, the Everett Magnesia Manufacturing Company purchased the limestone quarries. They created insulation material that was 85% magnesia and 15% asbestos. They dumped a lot of the asbestos into the limestone quarries. The health problems were not known at the time, but in the 1970s the plants were shut down due to health concerns. There are now areas in Valley Forge that you cannot go to because of the asbestos dumps. In 1910, a German filmmaker, Siegmund Lubin, established a film production company in Philadelphia. He needed more space, so he purchased 400 acres of land across the Schuylkill River from Port Kennedy. This area of land was called Bettswood. In Bettswood, he created the world's largest automated film processing laboratory. At this time, Western movies were very popular. To make his scenes look more Western, he would spread lime out on the ground of Port Kennedy. This made the area look dry. He would place signs saying Sheriff's Office and General Store over buildings, and he would also build facades in the quarries to give the look of canyon walls. Siegmund Lubin was known for his silent films involving train crashes and Indians attacking trains. The Pennsylvania Railway ran through the Bettswood property. Lubin used this portion of his track in his movies by having Indians attack the train. In 1915, one of his buildings caught on fire and he lost a lot of films. One of these films is called The Valley of Lost Hope. Residents of Port Kennedy claimed that he crashed a locomotive train into a quarry wall from the movie, but we will never know what actually happened in this movie. Bettswood started to die down with the start of World War I. Lubin later joined a motion pictures trust but when it was terminated in 1918, it ended his production of movies. People come far and wide to visit Valley Forge, and we are lucky to have it in our backyard. So now that you know that there is more to Valley Forge than the winter encampment, go take a hike, explore history and the beautiful landscape.